Ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Είμαι Ελένη Πετράκη από την Υπηρεσία Ασύλου. Πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα εισήγηση. Να δώσουμε το λόγο στην Emilie Page, είναι Protection Officer της ΥΠΑΤΗΣ Αρμοστίας του ΟΗΕ για τους πρόσφυγες.
Kalimera, everyone, and I'm sorry, that's as much as I can say in Greece, so apologies. I'm very happy to be here today on behalf of UNHCR, and thank you for to the organizers to have invited UNHCR today. As many of the speakers today have already said, the reason why it's so important for us to speak more about asylum seekers and refugees who are LGBTI is because they often flee from persecution in their country of origin. But once they are in the country of asylum, often the discrimination, the abuse continue. So that's why they are among the most vulnerable asylum seekers and refugees in all countries of asylum, including Greece. I wanted to say very briefly a few words just about refugee law, and before speaking more about the situation of asylum seekers and refugees in Greece. So, as you all know, the 1951 Convention is the main instrument for refugee law. And there are different grounds for seeking asylum. And one of these grounds is membership persecution on the basis of a membership of a particular social group. And this is often where claims based on sexual orientation or gender identity would fall in terms of the Refugee Convention. The UNHCR has developed a number of guidance to assess claims based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The latest one was updated and released in 2012, and all those documents are available online publicly. And last point, as UNHCR, we have a very strict policy for our staff as well. Our code of conduct is very clear in stating that staff have to treat other colleagues, but asylum seekers and refugees equally, and that no discrimination would be tolerated, whether on the basis of sexual orientation or others. When it comes to asylum seekers and LGBTI refugees in Greece, we have recently conducted what we call a participatory assessment. Basically, it's an assessment which took place between January and March 2017 in 10 of our offices throughout Greece were involved, along with 33 partners organizations, and I see some of you as well in the room. And we consulted asylum seekers and refugees from different ages, gender, and also ensured the diversity in the groups that we consulted. And LGBTI refugees and asylum seekers in this context were for sure included. And I wanted to share with you today some of the findings that we collected. One of the main concern, as it was also mentioned earlier, was social exclusion. So there is often multiple layers of stigmatization and social exclusion, starting with the family of asylum seekers and refugees. And this is often one of the aspects, because we focus a lot on violence and so on, which is extremely important. But this aspect is also essential, as when you're away from your country of origin, if you cannot have the support of your family, it makes it even more difficult. And yeah, so on top of the discrimination coming from the families, then you have the discrimination coming from their own communities, which is also very painful and very difficult for LGBTI refugees and asylum seekers. And then you also have, in some cases, also discrimination from host community in the country of asylum, and including in Greece. Then one of the other comment and other big concern that was raised was violence. So violence, unfortunately, as I said earlier, is not happening only in the country of origin, but also in the country of asylum. In terms of type of violence, there was sexual violence, including rape and sexual assault reported, physical assault, emotional violence, ranging from insults to more structured or, let's say, systematic type of harassment, and in some extreme cases as well, killing, including honor killing from family. As well, there were some risk points that were mentioned. And the main concern for the refugees and asylum seekers that were consulted was the time when they have to be on the islands. And this was really one of the main findings, which many of the organizations in the room also are already aware of, is that the risks of violence are much higher in the islands. And there was also a number of barriers to access to services. Many LGBTI asylum seekers or refugees explained that they felt discriminated by staff from organizations, so they were afraid to disclose their sexual orientation or gender identity. And they had particular issues with interpreters, feeling that this was one of their biggest concerns. And also one of the other, and last point maybe, concern was they were afraid in terms of standards for confidentiality within humanitarian organizations, and they were afraid that their sexual orientation or gender identity might be disclosed further because of potentially poor standards. This is also linked sometimes to the setting where interviews are taking place, which does not always allow for privacy. And the main recommendation was for asylum seekers to be allowed to come to mainland rapidly, and not to stay too long on the islands, and as well to do a lot more staff training, which I guess is very much in line with the conference today and the tools that will be developed. Thank you. And just one last word, as UNHCR, we have an accommodation program for vulnerable refugees and asylum seekers, and around 90 LGBTI asylum seekers have been hosted so far in this program. Thank you.